look in Acts chapter 9 this morning. Acts chapter 9. And I want to talk to y'all for a while about roads. R-O-A-D-S. You know, there are all kinds of different roads out there, anywhere from little tiny ones to huge ones. And the huge ones really make me nervous. Not far from the school, there is a road going toward the training school that has a sign on the road, but there is no road anymore. There are trees that big where the road used to be. And it's really, really creepy. And I couldn't take it no more, so I went up it the other day and looked around, and there was a small neighborhood, and all of the houses the road has grown up, the houses are caving in and all that, but I've always thought that was odd. And then there are some mountain roads that Donna and I have been up. When we went to Harlan, we went exploring in our Jeep, and there were some roads that ended on the top of a mountain, and we had to back down the mountain to get out of there, and just stuff like that. And then there's the kind of roads like if you're going to Williamsburg from here and you're stupid enough to take 64, I've learned to quit doing that, and you come through Richmond at rush hour, coming through on 64, and when I come out of Richmond for about the next half hour, my hands are fastened on the steering wheel like that, and Donna has to take and peel them off when we get to where we're going. You know, and heaven forbid if you ever take the Beltway around Washington, D.C. You know, that is absolute insanity. But it is, it's terrible. But so I'm going to ask you a question. What kind of road are you on this morning? What kind of road? Everyone here, even though you're sitting here right now, is on one kind of a road or another. You're given a road to travel, or you picked one that you're traveling. And some of you may know exactly where you're headed, and you are following God's directions. But most people today truly are not. Even a lot of people sitting in church, been in church maybe all their life, are not really sure exactly which way they're headed. So I want you to listen carefully. Most people are not sure where the road that they are on is going to take them, and so as a result they live in the moment. There are a lot of people that just live in the moment and don't really know what to do down the road. But do know this, I want you all to understand this. God knows the road that you're on right now, and he's getting ready to step out in the middle of the road and meet with you. And it will surprise you what he will do and how he will do it. But God's got everybody in their sights, and he's going to give you the opportunity to listen to him, to what he's got to say, even if he has to bring you to a screeching halt. There are two reasons that Jesus will do this with you. Number one, to give you a chance to be saved. You again, being in church doesn't have anything to do with it. You might have been going to church all of your life, but you may still be lost. You may be lost. And he will stop in the middle of the road that you're on and get you to think and give you that opportunity. And more often than not, he will stop you in the middle of the road to give you a chance to obey him with what he wants you to do now that you are saved, and to get on the right road. The Lord has a particular road for each and every one of y'all in here that he wants you to travel. And if you're on the wrong one, you can bet your life he's going to bring it to a screeching halt and get your attention and get you to get on the right road. Some of us are more hard-headed than others. I am very, very hard-headed. And sometimes he has to literally kick me to get me to listen. And my testimony is a very lengthy one about that. And so take it from me. Listen to him when he's talking to you, and don't waste your time. Now, you won't be able to do either one of the things that he wants you to do until, number one, and this is the toughest thing, you got to get your pride out of the way. Yeah. Pride's got to, and you got to humble yourself before the Lord. And there are a lot of people that have great difficulty humbling themselves in any fashion, but that's exactly what he's going to expect out of you. And let me tell you, the Lord knows how to humble you real quick. Don't make him have to do that. Go on and humble yourself now. But either way, I want you to prepare for Jesus to step out in the middle of your road and get your attention. There was a young man back in the day of the early church by the name of Saul. He was probably one of the most credentialed scholars alive at the time. He sat at the feet of the greatest Bible teacher of his day by the name of Gamaliel, the most highly respected Hebrew scholar, and this is who this young man named Saul was trained under. When people looked at Saul, and they looked at, and people went by the law then. The Jews went by the Levitical laws, and there were over 611 of them, what I'm told. They said that he was absolutely blameless. No one could ever find anything wrong with him, that he was just absolutely perfect on that. He was born to the right tribe. He was a Pharisee. He was a member of the Sanhedrin. He was a young man of great power, authority, and knowledge, had everything going for him, except he hated the Christian church. As a matter of fact, he held the clothes of the men while they went and stoned Stephen to death. And he was consenting to it. And with the authority that Saul had, he could give the okay for those men to do that. He persecuted the church. He chased people down, arrested them, hauled them to jail, because in his mind, he thought he was doing God a favor by arresting Christians. But I'm going to say this, God had other plans. And here Saul is getting ready to meet Jesus and find out the truth. It says, Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and desired of him letters to Damascus, to the synagogue, arrest warrants is what he got, that if he found any of this way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem. So he was on his way to Damascus. He was going to start arresting Christians and putting them in jail for preaching and teaching in the name of Jesus. I tell you, what goes around comes around, don't it? It's going on in this world even now. And even now, literally in our own country, we are being ostracized for believing in Jesus. We're looked upon as being evil because we do, or narrow-minded. Let me tell you something. If anybody ever accuses you of being narrow-minded because you believe in Jesus, you look them right in the eye and say, I can afford to be narrow-minded. I'm right. That's right. That'll take care of that. All right. That's the way to do it. It's okay to be narrow-minded if you're right. Always remember that. It's not always a bad thing. Now, as he journeyed, he came near Damascus. And suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven. Now you got to understand, any light that was ever seen from heaven or by an angelic creature or anything like that was absolutely pure and blinding, and you couldn't see anything past that light, and it really got your attention. And that's the way Saul was. He was so stubborn and he was so determined that he was going to attack the church of the living God, thinking he was doing the living God a favor, that Jesus had to literally step out in the middle of the road and blind him and get his attention. And so it was a light that shined round about him from heaven. And as a result of that, he fell to the earth. Now the great and mighty Saul is getting rid of pride and starting to humble himself. Listen carefully. A voice was saying to him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And the very moment that Saul heard that, he knew that it was the Lord. He didn't know all the details, but he knew that was the Lord calling him. The Lord had blinded him, had him down on the ground, and he knew who it was, and he said this, "Who are you, Lord?" He wanted to know the Lord's name, but he knew it was the Lord. "Who art thou, Lord?" While he was laying on the ground, and the Lord said, "I am Jesus, who you persecute. It's hard for you to kick against the pricks." Now, what this talks about is an ox goad. People used a long, sharpened stick.
I'm not going to say it.
Little inside joke. And to make the oxen pull the cart, they would poke that thing and make it go. And that's what they call goading that ox. And they would poke him with that sharp stick or whatever to make him go. And you know, some of you, God has been doing that with y'all for years. He's been coming behind you and poking you with a stick, and you might make one step or two and then you quit. And he keeps on. And God had been trying to get Saul's attention for a long time. Even though he was considered himself a great servant of God, he wasn't serving God like he was supposed to. He was rebelling. And he said, "It's really hard to kick against those ox goads, isn't it, old boy?" That's what he told him. And he kept poking him, and he wouldn't listen. And like I said, in a family tradition with the Cash family was a famous phrase that started, at least with my daddy, is, "Boy, if you can't hear, you can feel." And I knew exactly what that meant, and I learned quickly not to do what Daddy said not to do. But here, that God has been trying to draw Saul for a long time, and maybe that's what's happened to you. You've had a series of events that have happened in your life that maybe you're going, "Why in the world is this happening to me? I mean, that ought to be happening to Nikki or something, you know, or Debbie or whatever. But me? What did I do, you know?" But God is trying to get your attention. And he's rattling your cage, and he's sticking you with those ox goads, but you still haven't listened yet. And if any of you need a real technical term, I'm going to quote Foghorn Leghorn. "Boy, I'm cutting, but you ain't bleeding." And some of y'all are just not listening. And God's trying to get your attention. And so Saul, trembling and astonished, he didn't argue at all. He knew that Jesus had him finally. And he said, "Lord, what will you have me to do?" That's the question. That's the important question that everybody should ask when you finally meet Jesus on your road. Maybe you're already saved, but maybe you haven't obeyed. And he's still trying to get your attention. And now it's time for you to say, "Lord, what would you have me to do?" I was saved in June of 1969. I was called to preach on a Sunday night in, I'm not going to use the word ought, okay? I'm not that old. 1974, at the age of 17. Y'all can sit there and calculate my age while I'm doing that. And I remember the night that God called me to preach. I was sitting in the balcony of a very large church, and I told my current girlfriend at the time, I said, "I believe the Lord's calling me to preach." And she said, "Well, you need to go down there and make it public." And there were a lot of people at the altar, and I said, "You know what? Mine is not as important as theirs. I'll do that at a later time." And you know, I never did. I refused to do it, and I got to thinking. I said, "You know, I'm 17 years old, man. I got my whole life ahead of me, and I can do that later. I can go and surrender to preach at another time." And so I ran for 10 years, exactly 10 years. And I even piddled with it a little bit. I would go preach once in a while. I would teach Sunday school once in a while, but I would not commit. And I remember the very first time I ever preached, I was very young, and I got an audience with the people at the Lynchburg detention home. They brought them all out. I had literally a captive audience. Even if I was boring, they couldn't go anywhere. They had to stay there and listen to me. And 7 people accepted Christ during that time. And I was very excited, but then all of a sudden I thought about the other things that I was doing and I was involved in. And I even worked in some youth ministry, and I did sound. I ran sound for a church, and but I still wouldn't do what God told me to do. I knew what he wanted me to do, and I acted like I didn't around other people. And I tried this and I tried that, and I've worked in a lot of really high-tech jobs. I used to make eyeglass lenses for a huge optical company in Lynchburg. That's why a lot of y'all got in car wrecks back then. And then, lo and behold, I was a chemist for a local dairy. And I did calculations for all kinds of things like dips and cottage cheese and eggnogs, and I did the formulation to make milk, to add the right stuff to it and to bottle it and all that. And I did all the testing for bacteria and all that. That's probably why some of y'all have the defects that you have now, most likely. And then I got into law enforcement. I did it all. I've done everything, but I was not doing what God told me to do, and I knew it. I knew it. Until finally he had to get me down on the ground in '84, on my knees beside my car, on the side of the road. I reckon people thought I'd lost my mind. And I had both hands raised to the Lord, and I said, all right. This is what I said, all right, I'll do it. I knew what he wanted me to do. I didn't have to ask him. I knew. And I did. And it has not been an easy road, but man, I know I'm in the Lord's will. I know I'm doing what he wanted me to do. And I wished I had not wasted 10 years running and acting ignorant. And some of you might be in the middle of that right now, so I want you to just save yourself a lot of grief. And so here Saul said, Lord, what will you have me to do? And then the Lord told him, get up and go into the city, and it shall be told you what you must do. Jesus finally had him. He had him in his sights, and now he's caught Saul. And now he's going to tell Saul, this is what you got to do. God don't play with us. The things that he wants us to do are not optional. If you really belong to him, you're a child of God, he owns you. He bought you. We are to do what he wants us to do. And you'll find out that it's what you wanted to do all along once you do his will. Oh, you might fight it and you might find 100 other things to do, but once you actually do what he's called you to do, you will actually know true happiness and fulfillment. You really will, no matter how tough it may get. And so here they get Saul to his feet. And the men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man. And Saul arose from the earth, and when he opened his eyes, he couldn't see anything. He saw no man, but they had to lead him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. So here was the great and mighty Saul, who was going to arrest Christians. And now he can't even see, and people are leading him by the hand into Damascus. And he was 3 days without sight, neither did eat or drink. He was so blown away by what had happened to him. He couldn't eat nothing. He couldn't drink nothing. He couldn't see. He was absolutely devastated. He thought all along he was doing God a favor when he won't. And now he met him on the road to Damascus, and so he's waiting for word. All right, I'm here. What do you want me to do? And there was a certain disciple at Damascus named Ananias. And to him the Lord said in a vision, Ananias, and he said, behold, I'm here, Lord. God always has somebody waiting to disciple you, to mentor you, to help you. Don't ever think that you're totally alone. And the Lord said to him, and this was a surprise to Ananias too. This was a shock. Arise, go into the street which is called Straight. Isn't that a great name of a street for somebody that just got saved? Straight Street. Man, that's kind of hard to beat. It really is. Think about it. Maybe you need to get off the road you're on right now and go get over on Straight Street. That's the thing. And you know, God didn't have that. That was no coincidence. God set it up to look like that. And he said, and go to the street that's called Straight and inquire in the house of Judas for one called Saul of Tarsus. For behold, he's praying. He tells Ananias, go over to Straight Street and go to Judas's house. That's another Judas. And there is a man named Saul of Tarsus, and he's praying. And he has seen in a vision a man named Ananias coming in and putting his hand on him that he might receive his sight. Now, I get Ananias. I understand where he's coming from. They were being persecuted by the Romans, first off. It literally was illegal to be a Christian in Rome, and the Romans were killing people right and left for doing that. And now here comes one of the Jewish leaders, and he's doing it too. Everybody's against the Christian. And Ananias said, Lord, I have heard by many of this man how much evil he has done to your saints at Jerusalem, and now he's got authority from the chief priest to arrest everybody that calls on your name. But you know what? That didn't rattle the Lord. Jesus has the plan, and it don't matter who goes up against Jesus. His plan's going to get carried out. He is so much stronger and more powerful than anything the devil can come up with. So I want you to understand that if you're thinking about what it is that God has called you to do, and you look at all of the things that are against you that says you can't do it, please understand you can do it. I got a lot of people in here that can get up and come up here and tell me, yes, I can do it. I didn't think I could, but God showed me I could, and look what I've been able to do despite what's going on in my life. So, the Lord said to Ananias, go your way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me to bear my name. And this is what God's plan was for Saul. To bear my name before the Gentiles. He was a Jew. He was a Jew of the Jews. They didn't have any dealings with those filthy Gentiles. That's what he got called to do. Paul wound up being the apostle to the Gentiles. What's a Gentile? Anything that's not a Jew. So it don't matter what color or nationality you are, if you're not a Jew, you're a Gentile, okay? Now, he said he's going to bear my name before the Gentiles and before kings and the children of Israel. Wow. And I will show him how many things he must put up with for my name's sake. He's no longer going to be the persecutor of Christians. He's going to be one of the biggest ones that ever lived. That's what I've got planned for Saul. And so Ananias went his way and entered into the house, and putting his hands on him, listen, Ananias got on board right away. He said, Brother Saul. He accepted him as a child of God. And let me tell you something, when somebody, I don't care how notorious they may be, accepts Christ, they are a child of God, and you better accept them too. Brother Saul, the Lord, even Jesus, that appeared unto you in the way as you came, hath sent me that you might receive your sight and be filled with the Holy Ghost. This was something all new to Saul. Oh my goodness. And immediately there fell from his eyes as it had been scales. And he received sight forthwith and arose and was baptized. And when he had received food, he was strengthened. Then was Saul certain days with the disciples at Damascus. And in verse 20, straightway he preached Jesus. And he did it in the synagogues. He preached Jesus, that he is the Son of God. Now listen to the surprise. You do what God has called you to do, and everybody around you is going to be shocked. They will. If you obey him, they're going to be shocked. If you get saved, they're going to be shocked to see you serving God. All that heard him were amazed and said, is this not he that destroyed them, which called on this name in Jerusalem, and now hither for that intent that he might bring them bound to the chief priest. And now he's out there preaching the Jesus that he was persecuting. So I want you to understand that whatever road you may be on this morning, God has a plan. And if he has to, he will stop you in that road you're on. And he will do it to get your attention, whatever it may be. I don't know what's going on in your life, but only you know what God is doing to get your attention. And I would ask you this morning, would you please listen to him? He's not going to put anything on you that you can't do or that you can't bear. Serving the Lord is a privilege and it's an honor. Don't ever think that it's going to be a drudgery or something you're not going to like. When you see what God can do through you and with you, you're going to be like these folks in here, and you'll be astonished and amazed as well. But in order for that to happen, pride's got to go. You got to humble yourself before the Lord and let him call the shots. Again, I wished that I had not thrown 10 years away running from what I desperately love to do every day of my life now. Oh my goodness. You know, please let me tell you, just please listen. Do what he says. Answer his call. Don't run from him, and don't be afraid, because he always makes a way to do what he calls you to do. He empowers the unempowered. He gives you abilities that you never would have believed that you could have in order to do his work. And you can make a difference. You can make a change in the world by listening to the voice of the Lord. Don't pay attention to the devil. Right now, he's getting geared up to whisper in your ears. Don't do it. Don't do it today. You can do it next Sunday. And then he'll tell you next Sunday, oh, you got another week or two? You think about it? No. It's like that hymn, just as I am. Come on, just like you are. Let him take care of it, and he'll take care of the details. You don't need to worry. You just make yourself available. So shall we stand? This morning, if you have never given your life to Christ, if you've never actually been saved, that's the first thing he's calling you to. And I ask that you would come down here and talk to one of these prayer warriors. Let them pray with you. Maybe you are saved, but you've been going down the wrong road, trying to get away from the Lord because you just don't want to do those things that he's called you to do. Folks, stop where you are. Make it right with God and start doing what he has called you to do. You will be absolutely amazed at it. And maybe there's another need you have this morning. It doesn't make any difference. This altar is open for you, and we'll be glad to pray with you. So would you come as Candy plays a song of invitation, whatever it may be. Listen to the calling of the Lord.
All to Jesus I surrender all. To him I freely give. I will ever love and trust him, in his presence daily live. I surrender all. I surrender.
That's the key. I surrender all, not some. All. Surrender all today, folks.